talk sometimes about my own health and wellness journey and how I am one of the fortunate people who has been able to resolve autoimmune health issues through changes to diet, lifestyle, holistic interventions, that sort of thing. It turns out I'm not the only one. There are actually lots of us, and there is a big connection between making these healthy changes and how it impacts your body system and your ability to have some form of recovery or support against what's going on with whatever your autoimmune health issue is or a chronic health issue of some kind. And that's why today I am so delighted to be talking with my amazing guest and colleague. This is Casey Hibbard, who's with, hey, Casey.
Hi, Mira. So happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And, I love the fact that you have your podcast, Rebuilding My Health Radio. You're the storyteller in chief, which is a title I absolutely love, of Rebuilding My Health, which is an online magazine. And you also have had 30 years of writing and interviewing, and you really spotlight those natural and integrative health success stories. And again, there's so much for chronic or complex illnesses that can really be overcome. And I'm not the only one in this conversation who's done that. You also have reversed an autoimmunity. And so I'd love if you could start by sharing your story in a nutshell, and then we'll kind of dive into how this can happen and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share my story. Like a lot of us, my health started going off the rails probably 5 or 6 years ago. And symptoms like many of us experience brain fog. My gut was a mess. I had anxiety. I had arthritis, and I was probably in my early to mid 40s at that point. And also escalating autoimmunity. Just my autoimmune markers were just getting worse and worse each time. I didn't have a specific autoimmune diagnosis with a name, but I had autoimmune markers. So I went on this journey and ultimately was not able to get help in the conventional medical framework. Kind of started seeing more functional medicine practitioners, more holistic or integrative, and ultimately was able to start turning it around. And diet was huge, and we can talk about some of the other things that were influential. But let me share with you, yesterday I actually saw my functional medicine doctor and had some lab work done, and I have 0 autoimmune markers anymore. It was entirely negative, which, we really celebrated that. And then also my whole gut panel, I had all kinds of gut infections and parasites. And, it was just a mess. And that is entirely clean as well. So it was just really, exciting and emotional to have that, check in yesterday and really recognize how far I've come. So
that's really wonderful. And, I think for those of us who've been through, or anyone listening to this who is going through some kind of chronic health challenge, when you're in the middle of it, there doesn't appear to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And so I'm hoping that your story, like complete reversal of all of the autoimmune markers, that is a very powerful light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. That's the entire reason, I share my story, and I started the site and the podcast is really to inspire hope and healing, because as you said, it can be really difficult when you are struggling so much to know that what's possible and to have that hope.
Sure. So I'm curious though, what inspired you to begin to start to collect or capture the health stories of other people, those successes, and put them together?
Yeah, well, throughout, my own health challenge or journey, I came across a lot of other success stories. of people who were doing the same thing, but they were typically buried in private Facebook groups. I was in all these health Facebook groups and I would come across these amazing stories. And I was like, this has to get out there. People need to know what's happening. And like I said, I've been a writer for 30 years, started in journalism. And then I've been doing a lot of, corporate writing and interviewing for a very long time. And so I just decided to apply those skills, start doing interviews, interviewing people who had reversed, eased, or eliminated, chronic or complex illnesses, things that people typically think are not fixable. Once you have that diagnosis, it's all downhill and you just manage it. So it has been fascinating to do this work. And I love every person I get to showcase.
And that's really fabulous. I think part of the power, of course, of story is helping other people learn so that they can make changes or grow. And so I'm curious, are there any commonalities that you find as you've been collecting these stories?
Absolutely. Yeah. At this point, I've had the chance to interview hundreds of people to collect their stories over the past 5 years. And I do hear the same things over and over. And I hear the same things either on the front end in terms of triggers for illness beginning. And when I interview somebody, I'm almost waiting for them to say what the trigger was, or they may not know it, but they'll say, I just had a baby, which is a happy thing, but it's for many a stressful thing. And a lot of women's health actually starts going off the rails after that.
There's a huge hormonal shift.
There's a hormonal shift. There's the stress and not sleeping. There's all kinds of things going on. Or, a death in the family or divorce or serious work stress or, something major. So there's usually often a triggering event. And then on the more positive side, in terms of the interventions that have been the most influential for people, diet is huge. Dietary change. And when I say diet, I think many in your audience understand that I'm not saying go on a diet to lose weight or whatever. I'm saying, dietary changes to essentially reduce inflammation. Probably 99% of the people that I have interviewed have had to change their diet in some way to be able to heal. For some, it's just eliminating one or two things that are triggering or inflammatory for them. For others, it's, much more comprehensive. They get a big panel of their food sensitivities and they really tailor their diet. But that has been surprising how often and how powerful diet is. So I know you know that.
So many people. It's huge. And part of the challenge we run into is there really is no education around that as we're growing up. So if we happen to be born into a family system that eats a diet that is high in, vegetables and clean produce and no crummy ingredients and that sort of thing, lucky you. But even so, we're surrounded by this marketing effort by the food producers to convince us that we want all of these other things that make up that standard American diet, which has so little nutritional value.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's general things like, eating organic and avoiding pesticides and preservatives and artificial dyes. I saw your email this morning on artificial dyes. So, there's general stuff and then there's the individual stuff. You kind of have to look at yourself. A friend of mine last week said, she'd had horrible endometriosis pain for years. And the one day she cut out the soy creamer she was using in her coffee, her endometriosis was gone. That one thing was soy was the trigger for her. So besides there being some general things for all of us to pay attention to, it's important to pay attention to your own body and recognize, for one child, for one family I interviewed, it was raspberries. You would think that would be raspberries, are a healthy food, but for some people it can be triggering. So anyway, super interesting.
Those are
Yeah.
some really amazing stories. And I think, first of all, the raspberry one, I've seen that so many times where it's something that is supposed to be healthy or good for you. And
Yeah.
people don't realize that food is not a good choice for their body. So
Right.
that's huge. And everybody's body not only needs to be nourished differently, everybody's body responds differently. So we're all basically a moving target. Are there
Yeah.
other examples like that you can share?
Yeah,
Unusual
absolutely.
things?
Absolutely. I want to share some of my favorite stories. And my favorite stories tend to be the ones where it's a condition or a diagnosis where no one or most people would never expect that you can reverse that or not around. So I interviewed a guy named Ron in California who had an Alzheimer's diagnosis. He had the official diagnosis, had lost his driver's license, and he, met with a functional medicine kind of psychiatrist or psychiatrist, MD, who specializes in dementia, and they were able to find the causes behind it. And for him, they were very unique and personalized and specific. For him, he needed to eliminate some toxins. He lived near an Air Force base, and he had a lot of jet fuel in his body, like high levels of, the whatever's in jet fuel. So they, addressed his toxins, they balanced his hormones. That was a big thing. I think we often don't think men need to balance their hormones, but that was part of his story. And then they also needed to get his blood sugar regulated. And so he went on a keto diet for that. He was able to go back to the doctor, retake the Alzheimer's test, like didn't have Alzheimer's anymore. This was after, like a year. It took time. It takes time to do this, but he no longer had that diagnosis. He went back and got his driver's license too. So, I interviewed him, and it was stunning to hear his story. Others that really stand out, autism. I interviewed a family where the son had autism, and they, dug in, did lab testing, also found toxins for him were an issue. His mom had mercury dental fillings, and so they helped him detox from mercury. They put him on an anti-inflammatory diet, which is really huge for autism. I have multiple autism stories where diet is a really big deal for these kids. And use some homeopathy as well. And I think at this point, he's in grad school now. Like he is functioning, and I think he lost his diagnosis. Like she and the mom tells the story of going back to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician actually crossed out the autism diagnosis on his chart. And that was just such a powerful moment in their journey and in her story. So these stories bring me to tears often when I'm interviewing somebody, because it's so life-changing.
I think the other thing that's so wonderful about that, it's really a testament to the power of how much you can do by changing diet, lifestyle, cleaning up your system, all these different things, really. And part of the challenge as well is that, unfortunately, we live in a current system that tends to be of the if this then that mentality. If you have this condition, take this pill or do this therapy, none of which looks at, like you said, detoxing the body. That's so powerful, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it has to be done so carefully in order to make sure that you're not overwhelming the system with a toxic load dump. But if you do these things mindfully and carefully, there is a potential for things to turn around, which is really wonderful. So with all the hundreds of people that you've interviewed and all of these amazing stories that you share, I have to ask if there were just one or two things that you could share that you feel like people really need to know about health or about, recovering or restoring the body after a disease state? Like, what do you think is the most important thing for people to know?
Um, I really want people to know that it is not a one way, it's not one directional. You get a diagnosis, whether it's MS, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, all of these things that we think, you get the diagnosis and you just have to try to manage it until the end. It's a decline. Because there are so many stories where people have been able to turn it around. And as you said, it isn't easy and it takes time. And you really do have to dig in and usually find the root cause. And by root cause, I don't mean a diagnosis. Like sometimes I say you need to find the cause, and people are like, oh, I need to find my diagnosis. It's not necessarily that. It's more about what's causing it. It could be gut infections, it could be toxins, it could be like Epstein-Barr virus is such a common one, Lyme disease, mold. There's so many different potential things that could be going on. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be this big fix. Like for many of us, there are big things that need to happen that you have to address. But as you said, you can start taking steps, cleaning up your diet, eating in an anti-inflammatory way that's going to take the burden off of your system. Because that's what's happening when you're eating an anti-inflammatory diet, is you're allowing your body to kind of heal and taking kind of the stress off of your immune system in doing so. That's why it's so powerful for so many people across all different conditions.
And I love that you mentioned that it doesn't have to be this big thing. Even the small wins along the way are worth celebrating. I know for so many of my clients, one of the things that we start with is a micronutrient test, because if your micronutrients are deficient, there's not a lot of resources for your body to work with. As we begin to replete micronutrient status alone, they begin to feel better. Little aches and pains go away, or little symptoms start to resolve. Those are wonderful. And then we work on the gut and we start cleaning that up so that we're not just digesting, we're absorbing what we put in there. And again, it's a step-by-step journey, and not everybody is going to have a complete remission. Like that's just a fact of the way it is. But any win that allows you to feel better is a win worth celebrating in my book.
For sure. And one thing that's also super surprising is how fast people feel better sometimes. Like, somebody will say, oh, I cut out gluten, and within a week, the pain was better. Like, it's not always that fast. If you are cutting out something really triggering, you're going to see it very quickly. I think our friend, we have a mutual friend, Jane, within like a week, I think she said she noticed a difference
Absolutely.
with diet changes.
And one of the things that I absolutely love about it too is that when you commit to making these changes for yourself, you develop such a stronger connection with your body and really increasing that mind-body awareness. And that's such a missing piece in our modern culture that I love that we can help them add that back in and really move forward with that stronger, better balanced sense of self and body, which is great. Which actually brings me to another question. What do you think are some of the simple things that people can start doing to help support themselves and improve their health without, massive amounts of time or expenditure?
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things that I tell people, if friends and family are asking me this regularly, you kind of have to be your own detective with your own body and just really pay attention. And when you start paying attention, you will notice that certain things are making you feel worse, are triggering inflammation. We always, just personal story, we would go out to an Italian restaurant years ago, and the next day I was always super inflamed. And I realized at that point I was already off gluten. I realized that it was the tomatoes every single time. It was the tomato sauce that was spiking my inflammation. Like my hands were puffy the next day and kind of hurting. Like the arthritis would come back. And my husband's, doing this sort of dairy thing right now, like trying to pay attention, is dairy triggering for me? So keep a food journal, write down or get an app on your phone where you pay attention to, everything that you're eating and how you feel later on or the next day or the following days. But that's a super easy one. It's free. And people can really notice interesting patterns with that. Yeah.
And one of the best things about a food journal is it really does encourage you to pay attention because you're writing it down so you can look back. To be really honest, you and I both work in this industry, and I'm going to tell you, I don't remember what I had for breakfast 3 days ago if I don't write it down.
Yep. You absolutely have to do that. Yeah. And you'll start to see patterns. Sometimes you have to look back and go, wait a minute, every single time I had, a gut issue, or a stomach ache, or, whatever, I had this one food. Yes, I had this one food or this one class of foods. So it's powerful. And then I know your audience probably knows this, but just kind of reducing everyday toxins, is another easy thing that you can just start doing, but choosing organic and really reading the food labels, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Casey, thank you so much. You have shared so much information with us. It's been really wonderful to hear this. And I love that you bring a message of hope to people. That yes, just because you are struggling with some kind of health condition or you've been given a diagnosis does not mean that's the end of the line. That there are things that you can do to take back control. So I absolutely love that. Where can folks find you if they want to connect and learn a little more?
Yeah, so my site is rebuildingmyhealth.com. And then the podcast is Rebuilding My Health Radio. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram at just Rebuilding My Health. It just runs all together. And I did want to mention, I put some of my thoughts and key findings from across all these interviews in a download on my site. It's called 4 Ways to Ease, Reverse, or Eliminate Chronic or Complex Illnesses. And kind of just encapsulate some of the things that I have uncovered through all the interviews I've done.
That sounds great. Well, we will definitely put some links down below so that people can connect. And I happen to have a free food mood journal, so I'll put that down there.
Oh,
as well.
awesome.
Yes, so that people can grab that. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and chatting. It has been wonderful to talk with you. So
yeah, likewise. I love talking about this stuff. So thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. And folks, thank you so much for joining us. I will put Casey's links below so you can connect with her. And I'd also like to encourage you to please click that subscribe button so you know when we have more amazing information to share with you. Take care and make it a healthy day.